Gabriel Attal. In January 2024, he was appointed Prime Minister of France by President Emmanuel Macron, becoming the youngest person and the first openly gay man to hold that position in French history. He was 34 years old. France has a long and complicated relationship with discussing the private lives of its politicians, a culture of deliberate separation between public duty and personal life that goes back generations. Attal broke through that tradition simply by existing in the role openly. His appointment was not framed as a political statement by Macron, but it landed as one regardless. He served during a period of significant domestic tension in France, and his tenure was watched closely both for what he did and for what his presence at that level of government represented for the country. Leo Varadkar. He served as Taoiseach, Prime Minister of Ireland, a country where homosexuality was only decriminalized in 1993. He came out publicly in 2015, the same year Ireland held a historic referendum on same-sex marriage. The referendum passed. The fact that a country with such deep Catholic roots elected an openly gay man as its leader within a few years of that vote was not lost on anyone watching. Varadkar is also of Indian heritage, making him the first non-white and first openly gay person to hold that office. He did not talk about his personal life more than necessary. He governed, dealt with Brexit negotiations that directly affected Ireland, and managed the early phase of the COVID pandemic. People could see who he was, but his work was what made him famous. Jóhanna Sigurdardóttir. She became Iceland's prime minister in 2009, making her the first openly gay person to lead a government in the world. She didn't get into power by making her sexuality the main story. She had been a politician for a long time and had worked on social welfare issues for decades. She was elected during a financial crisis when Iceland needed strong leadership. She had also been dating a woman for a while, which she had never kept secret. She married her partner in 2010, making her the first head of government in the world to do so. That same year, Iceland made same-sex marriage legal. Being gay isn't the main point of her story. It's about a woman who led her country through one of its hardest economic times while being exactly who she was and not being sorry for it. Di Rupo Elio. In 2011, he became the first openly gay man to be Prime Minister of Belgium and the first openly gay man to lead a government in the world. He had been honest about his sexuality long before he got that job, and it didn't stop him from moving up in Belgian politics over the course of many decades. Belgium had already made same-sex marriage legal when he was appointed, but it was still a big deal for an openly gay man to be in charge of the government. Di Rupo is also a trained scientist and came from a working-class immigrant family, which made his story stand out in many ways. He went back to the Prime Minister's office in 2024 for a second term, decades after his first big political success. Xavier Bettel. He was the Prime Minister of Luxembourg and the first openly gay head of government in the world to get married while in office, which he did in 2015. Luxembourg is a small country, but it has a lot of diplomatic power because it is in the middle of European institutions. Bettel won a second term, making him one of the few openly gay leaders to do so. He talked openly and directly about who he was, which many leaders his age did not do. During his time in office, there were big changes in European politics like Brexit and the COVID pandemic. He was also one of the most well-known openly gay people in global politics during that time. Sultan Qaboos bin Said. He was the ruler of Oman from 1970 until his death in 2020. During that time, he changed the country from an isolated, underdeveloped area into a modern nation with infrastructure, schools, and a strong international diplomatic presence. After a short marriage that ended in divorce, he never married again. For decades, Western diplomats and journalists wrote about his personal life in a careful and secretive way, but those who watched him closely still knew who he was. He was one of the longest-serving leaders in the Arab world, and he ruled during a time of great instability in the region without any major problems inside his own country. Even after his death, his country never talked about his personal life in public. Banana from Canaan. He was the first president of Zimbabwe in 1980, which was one of the newest countries in Africa at the time. He didn't end his political career because of bad policies. He ended it because of a string of accusations that led to a criminal conviction in 1998. A court in Zimbabwe found him guilty of sodomy and indecent assault, and he was sentenced to prison. What made the case stand out was the testimony of men who had worked for him. Some of them talked about years of fear and coercion. Banana died in 2003. His story is complicated because there was real abuse of power and a legal system that made homosexuality a crime. But his name is in the historical record, and his case is still one of the most direct links between politics and sex in modern African history. Alexander the Great. He was one of the best military leaders in history. By the time he was 30, he had built an empire that stretched from Greece to the borders of India. Hephaestion was his best friend, and their relationship was much more than just friends. According to ancient sources, the two were very devoted to each other. Alexander even compared their relationship to that of Achilles and Patroclus, a famous couple from Greek mythology whose love was well known at the time. Alexander was so sad when Hephaestion died that he ordered a time of mourning for the whole empire. He wasn't trying to hide who he was. The world around him just didn't see things the way later generations did. Julius Caesar. He became one of the most powerful men in the ancient world by being smart, ambitious, and ruthless in Roman politics. Roman senators called him every woman's man and every man's woman. And this phrase was not made up by modern historians. It came from people who lived at the same time as him. When he was young, Caesar spent time at the court of King Nicomedes of Bithynia. People in Rome talked about their relationship for the rest of his life. His political opponents used it against him in their speeches. During his own victory parade, soldiers sang songs that made fun of it. Caesar never denied it. He just kept going, and the empire he helped build lasted longer than all of them. Emperor Hadrian. He ruled Rome from 117 to 138 AD and is known for Hadrian's Wall in Britain, rebuilding the Pantheon and making Rome one of the most architecturally impressive cities in history. But perhaps nothing reveals his inner life more clearly than what he did when a young man named Antinous drowned in the Nile River in 130 AD. Hadrian declared Antinous a god, founded a city in his name called Antinopolis, and commissioned hundreds of statues of him to be placed across the entire empire. Those statues are still around. Antinous became one of the most widely depicted figures in all of Roman art, and his face survives in museums across the world today, a permanent record of what one of Rome's most powerful emperors felt for him. King James the Thirster. Most people know his name because of the King James Bible, the English translation of Scripture commissioned in 1604 that remains one of the most widely read books in the world. What fewer people discuss is that James had a series of deeply personal relationships with men throughout his life, documented by ambassadors, courtiers, and political observers of his own time. His favorites, Robert Carr and later George Villiers, the Duke of Buckingham, were given extraordinary titles, wealth, and access to power in ways that went far beyond normal royal patronage. Letters written by James to Villiers survive today and are held in the British Library. The language in them is not the language of a king writing to a servant, it is the language of someone deeply in love. Richard the Lionheart. He became King of England in 1189 and spent most of his time on crusade. He was known as one of the most fearless military leaders of the Middle Ages, but before he became king, a French bishop publicly punished him and told him to break up with King Philip II of France and remember what happened to Sodom. It was said that the two men slept in the same bed and ate at the same table, which meant something very specific and well known to those who wrote about politics in the Middle Ages. Roger of Howden, a historian from the time, wrote this down in a clear way. People who knew Richard knew about his private life. It just didn't fit the image of a crusader that later storytellers liked to stress.